Charlie Kirk almost single-handedly brought a new generation to the conservative movement. And the aftermath of his stunning murder continues to unsettle the political world. Yet as authorities are still trying to understand what motivated the suspect accused of killing Kirk, the messages from political leaders have ranged from seeking calm to seeking revenge. For President Trump and his top officials, it's clear how they view this moment, a time to go after what Trump calls the radical left.
We are going to do what it takes to dismantle the organizations and the entities that are fomenting riots, that are doxing, that are trying to inspire terrorism, and that are committing acts of wanton violence. It has to stop. And my message is to all of the domestic terrorists in this country spreading this evil hate: you want us to live in fear? We will not live in fear, but you will live in exile. Because the power of law enforcement under President Trump's leadership will be used to find you, will be used to take away your money, take away your power, and if you've broken the law, to take away your freedom, Sean.
So is America entering a dangerous new chapter? To break this all down, we have CNN's Jeff Zeleny, NPR's Mary Louise Kelly, and the New York Times' Stead Herndon. Good morning to you all. Nice to see you all this Sunday morning. Different presidents deal with moments of crises in different ways. Oftentimes you hear an effort to try to calm things down on both sides, particularly when one side in particular is feeling a lot of pain. You had George W. Bush post 9/11 famously say, we're not at war with Islam, making clear that Islam is not a war, is a religion of peace, he said. Trump in this White House, based on what we heard from Stephen Miller there and what Trump said in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's killing, view this moment much differently.
I mean, as we know now, more than a decade on for President Trump's time in the White House, he does not view his role as a unifier. He does not view his role as a healer. He views his role as someone who motivates and energizes his own base. I mean, we don't need to hear Stephen Miller to know what President Trump is thinking, but that is very key because Stephen Miller now is one of the top advisors. And the difference between this term and the first term, some of those other voices like Ivanka Trump, for example, or Jared Kushner or others who kind of softened President Trump's edges occasionally, because there were a few moments in his first term when he would try to reach out or try to heal or comfort. That is gone. He does not see that as his role. In the very early moments of the horrific assassination of Charlie Kirk, President Trump made clear that he blamed it on the radical left. So even as I was struck Friday, he was being interviewed on Fox and Friends, the anchors there tried about 2 or 3 times to kind of lead him to water on, is this a moment of healing? And boy, he did not accept it or go there. This is who he is, us against them. So none of this should be surprising. I think the bigger question is how do others respond? And Utah Governor Spencer Cox sort of stood alone this week as an example of a different voice.
I think it's interesting, too. We've all watched, in the absence of information, conspiracies and partisan accusations fly and fill the void. This week, for the first couple of days, we had a void in terms of identity. We didn't know who, we didn't have a suspect, we didn't have identity, and we didn't have motive. We now have someone in custody, we have a name, we have an age, we have information starting to come out. According to county officials, this 22-year-old was registered to vote, had not voted, grew up in a home with Republican parents, and yet we still don't have really any idea about motive as we continue to piece this together, but we have not watched President Trump back off his rhetoric or his aides backing off rhetoric about the radical left, which we don't know, but there is no evidence to support that right now.
Yeah.
But there is radical left with fingerprints on this.
Yeah, look, he's 22-year-old Tyler Robinson. We'll learn what his motive is. We'll hopefully learn what his motive is. He's alleged to have committed this heinous crime, but Trump was very quick on Wednesday night in the aftermath of the murder to go out, he gave that Oval Office address and highlighted a number of episodes of political violence that occurred against Republicans in recent years. But this is sadly an epidemic that's happening to both political parties, this era of political violence. Just look on your screen the number of, since 2011, when Democratic Congresswoman Gabby Giffords was shot in Arizona, all the way, Steve Scalise, the Republican leader now, currently, 2017, he was shot in that baseball practice here in Washington. But look, just this year, there are several Democratic incidents affecting Democrats. Governor Josh Shapiro's home set on fire. There was Melissa Hortman, and her husband were tragically killed, a Democratic legislator in Minnesota. Trump didn't mention those Democratic episodes, but this is violence that is happening against officials from both parties, and this is the era that we're in right now.
Absolutely. I think, I've heard some people say, this marks a new era of political violence. I mean, as that graphic shows, we are already in that era. As we see cycle after cycle, these are targeted instances, and these are ones where the political motive is super clear. I mean, I think that we've actually, I think there's kind of cavalier rhetoric right now about violence and civil war. You'll hear this kind of from the right and left. And I think because the idea of polarization is so deep and feels like endemic to American electorate, I think folks have kind of resigned themselves to say something like this is core to our politics. But I don't think that we should really flatten the degrees here. Like when we start talking about sectarian violence, political violence, and people resolving disputes kind of outside the marketplace of ideas, that messes everybody's life up. And I think that's kind of antithetical to the idea of American politics. And so this moment, I think, crystallizes the change in which we've seen over the last several years. And I think it really is one that American electorate has taken to heart. They recognize that our politics has changed, and it's part of the reason so many voters have become increasingly distant from it.
And if you look at that graphic there, 2011, when Gabby Giffords was shot, that was such a staggering moment. But look how many are in 2024 and 2025. The frequency with which these events are occurring on both sides is very notable here. And we are united in our own divisions. Algorithms and other things drive our thinking that way. So a lot has changed since 2011 in our society, but certainly on both sides of this. And it's just stunning.
Yeah, to inject one piece of reporting that our team at NPR has been doing this week, which was interesting, is, there's often this assumption that political violence in this country maps right alongside political divisions in this country. That if someone on the right has been attacked, you got to blame somebody on the left and vice versa. And in fact, it's not nearly that clean or neat. Again, so much we don't know about motive and what was happening this week with the shooting of Charlie Kirk. But if you look, one of my colleagues, Odette Youssef, has done really interesting reporting, and she said, look back at the attempted assassination of Donald Trump last year. Yeah. The first attempt. Last summer was quite the summer. But the one in Butler, Pennsylvania, where he was at an open-air rally. The individual involved in that had also been looking at events where Joe Biden was going to be out and might be vulnerable. So, yes, there are political divisions. Yes, there's political violence. There is also, a lot of data that suggests that some of this doesn't map quite that neatly, and maybe we're looking at people who also just want some high-profile incident of political violence to get attention.
I think in general that right-left dichotomy is becoming increasingly useless. I mean, it's becoming harder and harder for us to map, I think, folks onto this. And so I think it's important to bring up what happened last year with President Trump, because for several of these alleged shooters, you don't see a consistency of belief. If anything, you see a kind of brain poisoning from what I would call a growing generation of kind of internet, like folks who have really kind of molded their identity in the kind of irony poisoned Reddit subreddit. You know what I'm saying? That is much more,
and
I think,
have access to guns.
Yeah, yes, for sure. But I'm saying that is much more reflective of the political makeup than a strict right, center, left. And I think that's important to point out.
You had mentioned, Jeff, Spencer Cox, the Utah Republican governor. He's been prominent in the aftermath of this assassination against Charlie Kirk. His tone on how to handle the next phase of this has been much different than Donald Trump's. Listen.
The radicals on the right oftentimes are radical because they don't want to see crime. The radicals on the left are the problem, and they're vicious and they're horrible.
Your generation has an opportunity to build a culture that is very different than what we are suffering through right now. Not by pretending differences don't matter, but by embracing our differences and having those hard conversations. I think we need more moral clarity right now. There is one person responsible for what happened here, and that person is now in custody.
So much different. I mean, there's one person responsible here. That's not what Trump is saying.
Not at all. I mean, Governor Cox, this has long been central to who he is long before this. He believes that, yes, we can disagree, but should be done in a much friendly, neighborly way. But he is not a lone voice, but certainly a rare voice among leaders in this party.
Yeah, no question.
And he has not just talked the talk, but walked the walk. I'm remembering he's done events with, for example, his Democratic counterpart, Jared Polis, Wes Moore,
right.
you know, next door in Colorado, saying, look, there are ways we can work together.
Yeah.